What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So as you can see, once again, we have the GTO behind us. If you guys are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, ring the bell. It'll keep you up to date on the Hellcat build, the Duramax, and the GTO that's behind me. So if you guys have been following along, in the last couple videos, we've been working on the GTO here. We got the full front suspension back under the car, all new bushings and all that good stuff. If you want to check that out, you can go back on the GTO playlist, and you can find all the videos of everything we've done to this car so far. So in the last video, what we did was I showed you guys how to cut the fenders, and before that I showed you how to disassemble the rear end, which leads us to today's video. So today's video, we're going to actually be putting this thing back together. I'm going to give you guys all the torque specs, show you guys how we did the axle stubs, the bushings, all that good stuff, get the cradle back in it, and start getting this thing all bolted up and hopefully get it on the ground by the end of the video. Alright guys, so as you can see, we got the control arms and the crossmember subframe, whatever you want to call it, all painted up. I'm pretty happy with how it came out. I use this like sandpaper finish. It's almost like a bed liner, non-rubberized, but I'm really happy with how it sticks, and it's really good against rock chips and stuff like that, so I went for it. As you can see, the crossmember is all done as well. We got the subframe bushings in. They were super easy, pretty self-explanatory. You can push them in by hand. They slide right in, up. And then once they're in and bottomed out, you just take this guy and slide it right on over, and it's pretty much done. So we're going to move on to the next project, which is making some room for the 275 drag radials. So on the red car, if you guys go back, there's a video of me rolling the fenders. Well, on this car, I didn't want to do that, because with the rolled fenders, in some spots, it kind of bubbled out on the outside, and it was really easy to crack the paint, and I just wasn't 100% happy with it. So on this car, I decided that we're going to try grinding it. And you can see, this is how big that lip is on the whole fender. Well, you can see where I ground it back already, and we took a lot out of it. And then I'm just going to use some seam sealer along there, and we're going to go for it and see what happens. Alright guys, well, we got everything out and apart. I'm waiting for better weather tomorrow, so I figured I'd go ahead and swap these axle stubs real quick. It's pretty simple. Not so simple with one hand, but let me see if I can. There we go, I think. Yep. Alright. It's literally all you guys got to do. Put a little bar in there, and it'll pop free. And then, hold on a second. There we go. I just didn't want to leak any fluid, so I wanted to tilt it the other way. Boom, just like that. These are the stock axle stubs. And then these are the ones that came with the car. He told me that they were Gforce. I can't promise that they are. They definitely look like they were used. I think he bought them used or something, which doesn't really matter to me. But they came with the car, and they definitely feel beefier, and just the construction on them alone looks beefier. Like, you can just see how they're a way beefier design. The axles are supposed to be Gforce too, but every Gforce axle I've ever had has their decals and stuff on them, but they're definitely beefier than stock axles. I'll show you guys real quick while I got you here. These are the axles that came out of the car. And if you hold them up or compare them to the stock axles in the red car, they're definitely, the shaft's a lot bigger and the CV's a lot bigger. So they're definitely, in my opinion, an upgraded shaft. I just don't know from who. He had this car for a long time, so it's definitely not out of the question that maybe he bought them from Gforce way back in the day when they were just black axles. So who knows? But like I said, guys, we were just messing around down here in the shop tonight. Figured I'd show you guys how to pop those axles out. Pretty quick and easy. But let's go ahead and get the other one popped in. It's in. So now we've got some Gforce spindles in here. Should be all good to go. I'm still debating on if we want to send this off and have a wave track and some different gears put in it. I haven't really decided yet. The GTOs come with 346s stock, and since this is a 6-speed car, between the gearing in the transmission and the gearing in this rear end, it's just too much, in my opinion. The rear end needs like a 370 or 390 or something. But like I said, I haven't really decided yet. We'll figure that out later. And let's get back at the control arms. Alrighty, guys. So we have got our control arm up here. I've been doing quite a bit of research, and it's pretty hard to find where you want to put the adjustable bushing for camber. From what I have found, they tell you to put the toe adjustment in this location, which would be our inner location, and then this one would be our outer, and they want you to use outer for camber. And since we only bought one adjustable kit, because I don't need to be able to adjust toe, because I have another means of adjusting toe, so we're going to be using this outer location. So I'm going to give you guys a quick look at what all comes in the packages with these with these bushings. I already gave you guys the part number, but there it is again for the adjustable bushing. Now you've got a series of lock washers, 2 nuts, 2 short bolts, and then 2 longer bolts. Now, the way that you want to assemble this is you're going to put the eccentric sleeve inside the bushing, which would be this guy. So you're going to want to take this guy, grease all of this, and grease all inside this bushing, and then you're going to want to slide it inside it, like so. Slide the other one in like so as well, and then you end up with this. So then you want to take your longer bolt, which is this one, you want to put it in the easier to get to location, and you're going to want to have the lock washer all the way at the bottom, and then the nut that you're going to use to lock it down, and then the long bolt. So you would turn this clockwise to make your adjustment, and then once you have it adjusted where you want it, you would tighten this guy down. Now anytime you're going to be adjusting or trying to rotate this bushing, you're going to have to back off on the shorter bolt, which is over here, which also has its own lock washer. So I personally don't grease the outside of these bushings where they're going to be contacting the metal, because we're trying to eliminate and limit movement. So I only grease very, very well inside here, all over this collar, and all inside this bushing. Now, onto the next one here, we've got the fixed one, goes together very similar. You got your crush sleeve. You're going to grease all this very well, grease inside this hole very well as well, and just slide it in there, and then slide the other bushing on, and that's done. Here's the part number for that. Now, all the Super Pro bushings, I've been using them a long time, and they always come with silicone-based WP grease. Now, I've been using a lot of these, so I found on ECS Tuning on their website, you can find a 500-gram tub of it, WP grease, silicone-based, same stuff, and it's just easier sometimes to have extra in a brush. Some of these bushings, like this one here, only comes with 1 tube of grease. Of course, this one, you can see we've got 4. We'll have plenty of grease for that. But for me, it's just easier. So if you guys want to pick up a tub, you can. And these are the instructions that come with the adjustable bushing. So let's go ahead and see if we can get these guys in. Well, alright guys, so we've got both bushings on this control arm in. Pretty happy with how they went in. As you guys seen, this came in really handy for this. I've got a bunch of different sizes, from tiny ones to big ones to some bigger ones that aren't even in that drawer. You can get Lowe's, Home Depot, a bunch of different places you can get these, and there's a bunch of different brands. There's like Easy Grip and a couple other ones. These are just happened to be the ones I found, and I liked how well they clamped, so I went with them. But let's go ahead and finish up the other control arm, and then we can actually start putting this car together. Alright, well, as you guys can see, we got all the bushings in, and everything is pretty much laid out how it needs to go. The only things we are missing still are the bushings that go on the sway bar. I did speak with customer service, and they should be here Saturday. Everything, as you guys know, is a lot of it's on back order. You can't get stuff for weeks. So we're going to start putting it all together, and then hopefully we can change those bushings with all this in the car. So for assembly here, all we really need to do is I cleaned up the surfaces here where the bushings are going to ride. And we're going to use some of that same grease that I showed you guys before on the face of every single one of these bushings. So we want to get a nice coating where they're going to ride in here, because they're going to pivot with that collar. So these are going to be movement on here, and we don't want squeaks and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and get some of that silicone grease out, and we're going to start greasing this stuff up and hopefully get it all together. Alright guys, so we got the control arms onto the Crossmember here. You've seen when I put this one on, I just went ahead and repeated the same process to do that one. But I didn't really explain to you guys what I was doing here. So we're gonna try to put all of this together, the control arms on. We're gonna slap the diff onto the Crossmember as well. And we're gonna set the sway bar up in here and leave the sway bar loose for now, because we have those new bushings coming for those. So we're gonna try to squeeze those in once it's in the car. But the diff we're going to go ahead and torque down, but the control arms we're still going to leave backed off for now, so that once we get it in, we can get it somewhat close, because since we have those adjustable outer camber bushings, we're going to have to get in alignment before you can really do much with the car. But we're going to leave those ones loose because we might have to play with them a little bit. But like I said, the diff we can go ahead and torque down. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing lifted up and get the diff under it. Alright guys, so as you can see, we got this whole rear cross member back together. Not really sure what happened there in the last clip. I lost sound for some reason, so I just ended up making it a time lapse. But these bolts here, you want to torque down to 66 foot-pounds and then an additional 38 degrees. So go ahead and do that. They are torque to yield bolts, so GM recommends that you replace them. I personally did not replace them. I just put some Loctite on them. That is totally up to you guys, but like I said, GM does recommend replacing them after each use. So let's go ahead and finish up what we got to do here and get this thing in the car. So this actually for once worked out pretty good. As you guys remember, I had mentioned that the only thing we were still waiting on were the bushings for the stabilizer bar in the rear, but luckily they came in a day early. So what we have here are the white line bushings. They are grease free. The part number is right here for you guys. This is for a stock rear stabilizer bar, 16 millimeter bar. So let's go ahead and get these things opened up and we'll start putting this thing together. If you guys decide to use the same bushings that I did, you will notice that these are grease-free bushings. And what that means is they use what looks like a carpeting, but it's actually a PTFE material in there, and it's supposed to eliminate squeaks. So you can go ahead and install these. Do not apply any silicone grease to where they ride. They're supposed to be fine all on their own. So we're going to go ahead and get these guys set on here and indexed how we want them, and then get our little brackets on there, and then we will bring it over to the cross member and get it torqued down. I believe these ones we're going to torque down to 16 foot-pounds. So let's go ahead and get it put together and we'll get over there. Alright guys, so as you can see, we got the whole rear cross member and everything as an assembly up on these dollies. We're going to start trying to slide it up under the car here and start trying to get this thing in. Alright guys, so as you can see, me and Pops got the rear cross member up. We did end up having to switch the adjustment bolts for the control arm around. We put the adjusters on the outside because as you can see here, when we made clearance for the wheels up here, I decided to grind this out a little bit because it was so tight to get to that bolt before. Now you got a lot of room and it's nice and easy to get to. So next step for us is going to be to tighten and torque down the crossmember bolts. Let's see if I can get you a better angle at that. You got the 3 on that bracket, and then you got the one main one for the bushing. So we're gonna tighten the 3 on the bracket to 52 foot-pounds, and then we're gonna go 92 plus, I believe, 40 degrees on the crossmember bushing. And then we can come back here, we're gonna drop our jack and put it up under the diff, and we're gonna put our Gforce diff brace on there, and then we will be about done getting this thing bolted up. Alright guys, so we've got the crossmember all up in here. Now we're gonna go ahead and start torquing this stuff down. The smaller bolts for the crossmember bushing, the brace or bracket, whatever you want to call it here, that has the 3 smaller bolts, that you want to torque down to 52 foot-pounds. And then this center big bolt here for the actual bushing itself, we want to start at 92 foot-pounds, and then we're going to have to go an additional 40 degrees.
I wouldn't. That should be right there.
Alright guys, so as you've seen, we've got the control arms and crossmember in. We still haven't tightened the control arm bolts yet, as we're going to wait until we start getting some more of this together, and then try to eyeball the alignment for the camber adjustments the best we can, just so we can put it on the trailer to bring it for an alignment. Or we have the shop right down the street, so we're going to hopefully get it close enough to where we can just drive it when we're ready. And then you can see we've got all the good parts laid out here. We've got the Pedders X drag springs. They're actually a slight raise, like height raise for the rear of the car. Then we've got some PROFAB chassis toe arms. We've got some axles. When I got the yellow car, these axles actually came with the car, and the previous owner told me that they were Gforce axles, but I'm honestly not sure what they are. They're definitely all around beefier than the stock axles that I have laying around. The shaft itself is definitely a lot bigger. We measured it with calipers and it's way beefier. And then just by looking at the CV joints, you can tell that those are beefier as well. So not 100% sure what brand they are. Every Gforce axle I've had has the Gforce branding on them. So if one of you guys know what they are, go ahead and leave it in the comments. And then we've got the Viking double adjustable shocks and a Gforce diff brace. So all this stuff minus the axles and the toe arms I bought for the red GTO less than probably 300 miles ago. So we pulled it all out of that car. We're going to put it into this car and see what it does. Alright guys, so we've got part of the Gforce diff brace up here. You can see that we're going to put this piece on, the main body of it on, that bolts to the frame first. We've got our torque wrench out, and we're going to be torquing that one to the 4 bolts on that to 26 foot-pounds. And then once you get those torqued down, we'll show you how to do the rest. Alright guys, so now we're going to go ahead and put this center section in. You want to put, you can see that this section, it's thinner than down here, which means that these bolt holes are offset up. So we're going to go and put the thinner section up in there, like so. Then you can take a bolt and just get these started in there. And then you're pretty close, so then you're just gonna, we're gonna just put our nuts on the back just to make sure it holds us in place for now. And then you can go ahead and line your diff up and take the Allen bolts, the 12 millimeter Allen bolts that come with the diff brace, and try to get them lined up with the actual diff. Alright, so you're going to want to lower or raise your diff to get this lined up, and then we leave these bolts loose so that you still have a little bit of play in here. And then This is the easier of the two, so I'm going to start with that one. Then you can go ahead and get this one started. And we will be torquing these ones to 70 foot-pounds, the ones that go into the cover. So let's go ahead and get our torque wrench and we'll torque those guys down. So for these bolts, guys, I wasn't able to find you a torque spec on them. I'm just going to use my best judgment on them. I mean, you want them tight, but I wouldn't go ridiculous on them. Yeah, that's good.
Yep.
Alright guys, so as you can see, we got the diff brace up and mounted. It's in place. Looks pretty good. Definitely a lot better than that flimsy stock one. So let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. Well, it ended up being a beautiful day out here today, so we figured we'd come out here and work on the red GTO a little bit. We got the rear end back together on this one with the parts that we took off of the yellow one, since we put all the upgraded parts from this one onto that one. So we wanted to put this one together so that at least we could roll it around and move it and get it turned around so we can get ready to pull the engine and trans out of it. But before we did that, I decided to fire it up for a minute and just let it run, since it's more or less might be the last time that it runs in this car. So we figured we'd let it run for a minute. Alright guys, so another day in the garage here. We're getting ready to put this side all back together. First thing we're going to start with is our Viking double adjustable shock here. As you can see on the top, you've got two nuts. They're 14 millimeter. You can see one is thinner than the other one. The thicker nut goes on the bottom, and then you use the thinner nut as a lock nut. These are going to be getting torqued to 10 foot-pounds. So let's go ahead and set this guy in the car and start getting it mocked up. Alright guys, so as you can see next here we have a spring, we have our mounts, and we're going to go ahead and set it up in the control arm right here, and then we're going to jack it up with this little jack to get it into place, and then we're going to use the shock to lock everything together. Now this bolt for the shock here is going to be 85 foot-pounds. So let's go ahead and get set up and we'll get this thing in. Keep going. A little bit more forward. Yeah.
Shift this around a little bit. All right into place.
It's done. Well, as you guys can see, we got the shock and the spring mounted up. We are going to get ready to put the axle in now. So what we're going to do with this is I clean these bolts up and I'm going to put some blue Loctite on them. And then once we go to put it in the car, the old torque spec used to say to do, I think it was 37 foot-pounds and then 67 degrees. But after looking online and stuff, I found that there's like an updated torque for these. So we're gonna follow that, which is 60 foot-pounds. So let's go ahead and get some Loctite on these guys, and then we will put this thing in the car. Alright guys, so now I'm going to use the electric ratchet just to get them close, and we're going to do this one, and then we'll spin it all the way around over to this side, and we'll keep going crisscross until this whole side is snug, and then we'll do the same up on this flange, and then we'll come back with a torque wrench. Alright guys, so now we're going to start torquing these, and the way that I do it is I'm going to start right up top here, and we're going to go to 65. Like I told you before, the old torque spec was like 37 and then 67 degrees, but they updated that as far as I can tell, so now it's just 60 foot-pounds. And then I take my paint marker just to make sure, and we mark that one with a little dot, and then we're gonna go to this one. Alright guys, so now we're just gonna go right around the circle and double check every one of them, because sometimes when you go crisscrossed, the one you started with might loosen up a little bit from it getting sucked in from all the others. So another little thing I like to do when I'm doing the axle bolts is I'll take my paint marker after we went around the second time and made sure that they were torqued. I'm just going to take and make a line that goes right to the stub, or whatever you want to call it, the end of the axle shaft. And I'm going to do that on every bolt. Just so that we can look at it later and tell if they moved or if we need to check them or anything like that. So now we're good. Now we can move to the outer one, and then we can start getting to the tie rod, or the tow rod for the rear. Get the sway bars on. Then I think we're going to be ready for brakes, and we can start playing with that camber adjustment and set it somewhat close and get this thing back on the ground. Alright guys, so now we're going to start putting the tow arm into place. And you got to use, at least in my case, we're using the PROFAB bar. You've got to use these little spacers. And then the torque spec for this is 46 foot-pounds. Alright guys, just like the inner one, this one gets torqued to 46 foot-pounds. Alright guys, so it's about time to install our sway bar end links. These are also, the bushings in here are also from Super Pro. They're their poly bushings. I'm going to also use some of that silicone grease that we have for these specific bushings. All I'm going to do is put some on the face of the sway bar where it's going to meet up with this bar here, the actual sway bar, and then I'm going to put some on both faces, this face and this face, because it's going to go in between here. So let's go ahead and get these things greased up, and then we'll start slapping them in. Alright guys, so as far as the torque spec goes for these, I found a lot of conflicting information online. Some people claiming all the way up to 72 foot-pounds. I wouldn't go by that. I would use your best judgment. Look up exactly what bushings you're going to be using, whether they're factory or aftermarkets. I'm using the aftermarket Super Pro bushings. They're a poly elastomer. And I'm just going to use my best judgment to tighten them down till they just start to crush. As you guys can see, we got this thing back on the ground. Whole rear suspension is done now. We did the front in the last video. If you guys missed that, you can go back on the channel and check that out. Finally getting steps closer to getting the engine and transmission into this thing. It's getting pretty exciting. We're not all that far away. We're going to start pulling the engine and transmission out of the red GTO here soon. But I think that's going to wrap up this video, guys. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a comment, all that good stuff. And we will catch you on the next one. Hey.